legs were so swollen. My knee was the same size as my ankle. I was sitting on the bed one day, I got out of the shower, and I was just in so much pain. Like walking, it just felt like squish, 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 and just the throbbing pain of it.
I was searching the internet one day and I saw this picture, 3 pictures of legs, and the middle one looked like my legs. I'm like, oh my goodness, that looks like my legs.
It just didn't make any sense to me that I had lost so much weight, and I was even eating better and exercising better than I had done when I lost the weight.
And the doctor looked at me and he said, Amanda, I don't know much about this, but it looks as though you have something called lipedema.
People look at me and they're like, just lose weight. And it's not that simple, and it's not my fault.
Finding out that I had lipedema was more of a relief than a scary thing at all. I knew what I had, and now all I have to do is figure out how to live with it.
Hi, my name is Catherine Seo, and I'm a professor at Cambridge College in Massachusetts and the founder of Lipedema Simplified. For years, I've suffered with weight issues. Peri-menopause brought on an unexplainable weight gain, and after 5 complicated surgeries that were based on a misdiagnosis, I found out that I have a fat disorder called lipedema. To tell the truth, I didn't know there was such a thing called lipedema. And I'm not the only one. Today, most people, including those in healthcare, don't know about lipedema. So I decided to find out what it was. It was a journey that took me 3 years. I traveled to the UK, throughout Europe, and all over the US. I interviewed scores of doctors, researchers, and patients. And this film is a result of that search. Lipedema affects up to 11% of women. It was first identified in 1940 as a fat disorder by doctors Allen and Hines at the Mayo Clinic. Lipedema happens when fat is distributed in an irregular way beneath the skin, usually in the hips, buttocks, and legs. Symptoms include a disproportionately large lower body and column-like legs, which are often tender, painful, and bruise easily.
Always struggled with my weight.
I knew that my legs were larger than they should be.
You're growing fat, you eat too much.
My legs started getting bigger.
Really thick elephant legs, as my mom and I would call it.
Sometimes I could barely get out of bed.
But my ankles got bad when I got pregnant.
The numbness, the pins and needles, it's not normal.
Terrible bruising.
My legs ached and I was always covered in bruises.
To take one step was such an effort because I felt like I was lifting a 100-pound weight.
The immobility has been so debilitating that I can no longer work.
I would go to the doctor and I was told I was too fat and to take diuretics.
Yeah. They told me there was nothing I could do.
And my doctor said I'd got gout.
I did everything I could to try and lose the weight and nothing seemed to work.
Tried every diet, been on a diet since I was 7 years old, I think. But nothing ever made the legs get smaller.
Well, I need to do more, and even more, and I thought I can't do any more.
So it took me 30 years to work out what it was.
It's a newer condition, I think, as we all know, or more newly identified condition. In the U.S., unfortunately, most doctors still don't know about it. And I got to be honest, I really didn't even hear of that term lipedema until a few years ago.
In my idea and my experience, it exists only in the extremities.
Lipedema tends to present at times of hormonal change. So although probably the majority develop it at puberty, it's not unusual to see women who develop it at time of pregnancy or even menopause. I'm pretty confident it's inherited.
This is a mother and a daughter, and they both have lipedema. Her daughter has stage 1. It's actually very difficult to find lipedema fat tissue, but if you follow the rule that the first place you look is the cubital area and you palpate, you can easily feel the nodular fat here, nodular fat in the thighs, although it's a lot harder to feel, and almost no nodular fat on the medial knee. This is a comparison between 2 sisters. And we call lipedema stage 2 when there are indentations within the fat. You can see she's starting to form lobulations here over her knees. Mom has lipedema stage 3. You can see that she has lobulations in her fat. So there's folding of the fat on the top over the bottom and also folds in the fat here. She also has a cuff of fat at the ankle. She's got some fat on her feet, but her stemmer sign is negative. She does not have lymphedema. You have lipedema, you have lymphedema, and that means that your lymphatic system is not functioning optimally. Laura has lipedema tissue. It's very easy to feel nodules in her tissue. And then on her hips, she has lymphedema. And you can typically see it on their lower legs, and they get ankle edema, and you can even see it on their feet. There's 2 camps. One camp that thinks that the fat comes first, where the body is driving a certain fat population to grow. That fat population is purely there for storage. It's not going to reduce in size. So even though it's very active, its goal is to stay as big and plump as possible. The other camp is that there is a defect in the early lymphatic endings. So the lymphatic system just doesn't function maximally. If your lymphatics aren't functioning well, you accumulate a little bit of extra fluid in your interstitial fat. This fat depot compresses the lymphatics, and that excess fluid is a rich environment for inflammation, but also for fat to grow.
So what exactly is the lymphatic system? Well, I like to think of it as the sewage system of the body. The fluid, cells, and proteins that escape from our circulation into our tissue is called lymph. Lymph fluid is taken up by the lymphatic system, a bunch of small vessels that collect the fluid and return it to the circulation through connections to veins in the neck. Along its journey to the neck, the lymph passes through lymph nodes that filter out foreign material before it re-enters the circulation. Lipedema can cause lymph fluid to leak into the surrounding tissue. This buildup of fluid causes swelling and is called edema. Over time, edema can damage the lymphatic system, resulting in further swelling. Swelling caused by an impaired lymphatic system is called lymphedema, and when lymphedema is a result of the progression of lipedema, it is called lipolymphedema.
We have learned in our 2 decades of progress that there is an intimate relationship between the function or malfunction of the lymphatic channels and the function of the fat storage cells that almost universally are found adjacent to the lymphatics. And when you think about it, a growing number and growing size of fat storage cells is another way to accumulate fluid. It's just that the fluid is in the cells instead of around the cells.
In 1987, I got involved in a self-help group, and that made a difference. There was a commitment, there was a community, and there was a structure. And the structure was simple. I weighed and measured 3 meals a day. I didn't eat anything in between. And I let go of all kinds of carbohydrates. So there was no flour, there was no sugar, there was no desserts. There were a lot of no's, but there were a lot of yeses. And the yeses were clean, healthy food and wonderful exercise program and a healthy lifestyle. And that made such a difference. And I was able to lose and maintain over 100-pound weight loss for over 20 years. When peri-menopause kicked in, it was like something started to change and the things that I had been doing stopped working. And it was confusing. I just couldn't figure out what I was doing or not doing. I didn't change what I'd been doing. It just, my body started to change. So I started a very long process of, different doctors, different tests, and I would say, I'm gaining weight. I don't know why I'm gaining weight. And they wouldn't believe me. I would say, I weigh and I measure my food, and I do that without exception. And I write it down, here's a log, and they wouldn't believe me. Throughout the ages, full-bodied, large, and voluptuous women were often considered the idealization of beauty in art and culture. But things are very different today. If you look at today's media, thin is definitely in. But as we celebrate wafer-thin models as the new ideal of beauty, there are many people in today's society that struggle with the issue of weight.
We tend to see a common public perception that obesity is caused by personal control and personal responsibility, or laziness, or lack of self-discipline. Those kinds of attributions for the causes of obesity are often at the foundation of bias because they lead to blame. Too often when people struggle to lose weight, when they're unable to lose weight, or when they're gaining weight, the assumption by providers is that they're non-compliant with treatment recommendations, or they lack motivation to make lifestyle changes, or they're just not trying hard enough, instead of considering other contributing factors that may be at play, such as the progression of an undiagnosed disease.
I think there's enough evidence really now that weight stigma is a problem. And it's not just a matter of not being respectful towards people. It's really that weight stigma has a harmful effect on people's health and well-being. I think that evidence is quite robust now. I think we need to think about targeting weight stigma.
My mother was overweight, especially heavy in her lower body, and everybody just accepted that this was the way she was. And she felt bad about herself for not being able to lose the weight, particularly in her legs. But nobody thought to look up whether it had a name. No doctor ever said the word lipedema to her. Most of the time, if you hear hoofbeats and a neigh, you turn around and there's a horse. Occasionally, it's a zebra. Most of the time, when a fat woman walks into your consulting room, she has ordinary obesity, but sometimes it's lipedema.
Even handling obesity in general is something in medical school residency that we never get training on. So then a specialized condition within that field we have even less knowledge about. And I think that that represents a real challenge for physicians, especially in the context of a busy practice. If you're have 10, 15 minutes to see a patient.
I think that the 15-minute problem is one of the big problems. The problem with the 15-minute frame that people are working in is that the amount that they have to discard is a very high level. The essence of what the problem is for the patient may have been left discarded.
Can we take a little bit longer with patients to have the opportunity to really understand, well, what's the driving force and factor for this patient, to try to eliminate some of those stereotype and snap judgments.
There is a bias that people have, that physicians have, no matter how much they say, I'm just going down a checklist of symptoms. It's not true. You have a bias. And so they're going to look at you and they're going to say, oh, you're just overweight.
I tried a 5-day fast, nothing, water, 5 days. Lost no weight, and then the minute I ate again, a salad, 5 pounds up again. So I told him that, and he looked at me and said, you know how I know that's not true? I said, how? And he said, because there are no fat people in refugee camps. That was what he said. So I knew then, he does not believe me. There's nothing this doctor can do to help me.
What went on for you when they said whatever they said, the doctors?
Nothing, I get quiet. And I leave. I shut down, I guess. Embarrassment and shame. Embarrassment and shame.
My biggest problem was that I listened to that advice. And I stopped eating, and I had so many issues with my metabolism, and I was malnourished. I was a fat person that was malnourished, And
that's the lipedema conundrum, because that's where patients themselves buy into the social value system that, they must be eating too much and not exercising enough, and yet they may be, and it's just something that's beyond that.
I think that that's where the risk for lipedema is that it's so often just assigned as general obesity and not thinking about, could it be something else?
Most significantly, they don't teach it in medical school. It has essentially little or no place in the medical school curriculum.
I know that I worked my butt off, and the scale's about to tell me just how well I did.
So I started my journey on The Biggest Loser from a casting call. To me, it felt like almost the magic pill. I just needed to get on The Biggest Loser, and I was going to do anything I could do. And I shared my story with America. I told them, this is who I am. I was this young girl, and I had always been told I had the pretty face, but never really felt like I had the body to feel as pretty as people would tell me I was. And I just had such insecurities, and I wanted to be able to blossom. I wanted this chance to prove that I could be more than who I really thought I was. On the show, I lost 87 pounds, and then additionally, a little bit before and a little bit after, I'm down over 107 now. It wasn't until I was on The Biggest Loser in 2009, the doctor looked at me and he said, Amanda, I don't know much about this, but it looks as though you have something called lipedema. I can't tell you too much more than that, other than that I'm worried you might not lose weight like other contestants on the show. And that to me was heartbreaking. That was almost the motivation I needed to really push myself that much harder. And it wasn't until about 6 months later when I could really start to research what lipedema was, and there wasn't much out there.
So they said exercise. I literally took a leave of absence from work. I took a leave of absence from school. So I was exercising between 7 and 8 hours a day for months and months and months. I felt great, but it still wasn't doing anything to when it happened. You know, what motivated me is that it looked like I was going to end up immobile, and I was absolutely unwilling to end up in a wheelchair. That just was not an option for me. I read everything on the internet. The craziest thing I did is I read about cabbage. And so you take cabbage and you chop it up and you put it on your body and you wrap it with saran.
Did it work?
No, it didn't work. It didn't work. And then I tried castor oil packs, and then I tried fasting. So I did wheatgrass, which I still do. I love wheatgrass. It helps. Wheatgrassing. And then I did the cabbage fast, which was just cabbage juice. And then at some point I realized, you know, oh my God, it wasn't working. And I still didn't have an answer. And then I was in with Melissa, was my lymphedema therapist, and she gave me Dr. Foldy's book, and I was reading it, and I came across the chapter on lipedema, and I started to read it, and by the time Melissa came back in, I said to her, Melissa, I don't think this is just lymphedema, I think I have lipedema. And she looked at me and she went, oh my God, I think you're right. Many women tell stories of the difficulty they experience in getting diagnosed, mostly because lipedema is still a little known and under-recognized fat disorder.
If a woman's presenting with a history of several decades of big legs disproportionate to their upper body and attempts to try to lose weight, and they've had no success, that there has to be an underlying reason. And then when you see that symmetric fullness of the hips and thighs and often the medial knee pads, fat lobules, it seems to then point more to the lipedema.
When you don't have a doctor's helping you, then you start trying to realize you're going to be the boss of this, you're going to have to try to own it. I started just actively researching every night. I've spent so many hours trying to find out what's wrong with me, and I would find little pieces of the puzzle. I figured out somewhere along the line, way before I knew about lipedema, compression was going to be something I needed. I just hadn't gotten the right compression because I hadn't gotten with the right doctor. I got to thinking that the best thing I could do is get a diagnosis. I needed to know for sure.
Lipedema is a challenging diagnosis because it's purely clinical. There's no test to confirm that the cause is lipedema.
But if we have lipedema and it is diagnosed early, it can be throughout the lifestyle staying at the stage 1.
I didn't know what this was till a couple months ago that I saw a program on Hallmark Channel where they were interviewing a doctor who does plastic surgery on the legs, and they referenced a Facebook page. And when I went on it, I looked at the stuff and I was like, oh, I think that's what I have, you know?
Mm-hmm. People often have back pain.
Yeah, sleeping.
Mm-hmm.
Sleeping
Yes,
back pain.
I've had that same, I've seen that
I
too.
can't sleep on my back because
Okay,
there's a
I removed this and afterwards they sleep perfect. Unbelievable. So it's just this ankle, this sharp ankle. You have some superficial varicose veins too. So when you walk, your problem is you have heavy legs, I guess. Heaviness. Any problem with walking with your knees or with your ankles?
I do get like knee pain.
You can hear it. You can hear it.
Mm-hmm. What interiorly here?
That's a big pouch here.
Yeah.
But she also has a huge pouch here. So, any questions?
I haven't officially been diagnosed with lipedema, because I found you guys before, so I just want to know.
You have a classical lipedema. You're happy about this?
I'm happy.
It's just to know that there's what's going on.
There's so much relief.
Yeah, relief, just so you understand what's going on.
Because I've dealt with this most of my life, and people look at me and they're like, just lose weight, and it's not that simple, and it's not my fault.
We know this. So we all in this room, we know this. So it's not your fault, and there is a treatment for it.
Growing up, I used to tell people that I had an hourglass figure. I just had extra hours in the glass, and But I feel validated. I feel so happy. I feel that I'm not the loser that I thought I was. I realize that now, that I was fighting a losing battle and I didn't even know.
I think the biggest thing for me with the many doctors that I've written to and spoken to on the phone, you get a certain feeling when you know somebody is in it for the right reason, that they have a heart for the patient and they've got a compassion for what you're suffering and they understand. And when you find that, that's your doctor.
I went for the lymphoscintigraphy, and at the end of the day I got a call from Dr. Carmody. And then I said to him, I think I have lipedema. He's so good at reframing things. He said to me, how exciting. Yeah, he said, we've been looking for an answer for years. It sounds like at this point you may know more about this than I do. You're gonna have to help me so I can help you. I said, great. I said, I've done all this research now. This is like all within a very short period of time. I'd been looking at this and that. So the only thing I could think to do to organize the information was to put up a website. So I put up a website. Here we are. And really.
I started dieting chronically probably at about 13 years old, and that's when I really saw the lipedema. I didn't know what it was at the time, progress. I just thought that I had, just the typical female shape. I was told that my shape was because of my ancestry. My mom is from Eritrea, used to be part of Ethiopia, so in Northeast Africa, they said, well, you just have the African body, that kind of thing. And so when I was about 16, I begged my parents to send me to Weight Watchers camp. I just kept gaining weight. And by the time I had my third child, I was up to 285, 275, around that. And I finally, about 10 years ago, lost about 130 pounds. And since then, I've gained probably about 20, 30 pounds back. And I hadn't changed anything. It just didn't make any sense to me that I had lost so much weight. And I was even eating better and exercising better than I had done when I lost the weight. And so I started gaining weight, and I went and saw my primary care physician, and he looked at me and he said, oh, you have lipedema. He told me that he had actually seen it before, and that there was no cure, and that it was going to get worse, and that it was pretty much a hopeless situation. So, yeah.
Now that I understand I have this fat disease, what are the things that will work? And how can you prevent it from getting worse?
When we talk about decongestive therapy, we're actually talking about manual lymph drainage. Therapists go through intensive certification, understanding the physiology and anatomy of the lymph system, and we actually do a manual massage, which is a pressure and a release. It's actually a very gentle massage, and it's a pressure and a release. It actually calms the nervous system, decongests the tissue, helps with toxic waste in the body, and actually feels really, really good.
Some people respond to manual lymph drainage better than others. So some people have more fluid in the lipedema fat than others. And so the more fluid you have, the more you're going to respond to manual lymph drainage, compression, pool therapy, all the 9 yards. So that's how you get the fluid out. But I think it's more than just getting the fluid out, because it comes right back. And then you have to get it out and it comes right back. So it's more of improving the overall flow through the tissue.
Manual lymphatic drainage is a difficult one because it's certainly effective in easing symptoms and reducing edema. The problem is, do you just keep going with it indefinitely? I mean, that's not financially sustainable in my view. I justify it only on the grounds of pain because it actually can help pain.
Manual lymphatic drainage is extremely effective, and with the combination of endomology, it's even more effective. You get better results at doing the two of them at the time. As opposed to like manual treatments, I would say that endomology goes way beyond, because your lymph is improved by 300% for the next 6 to 8 hours after the treatment. And your blood circulation is improved by 400%.
I do use compression garments because I believe during exercise that is going to be more effective, not necessarily in reducing the size of the legs, but it's certainly going to improve lymph drainage. And I would like to think would prevent progression to lymphedema.
So for 4 or 5 years, I guess now, for close to 5, we've been studying the fabric and what it does. And what it does is it creates kind of these indentations on your skin, and at a lighter compression level, which really makes them easier to wear, as you move, it helps to stretch and release the skin, which supports that lymphatic drainage through the lymphatic, through the superficial system, so through those capillaries.
For lipedema, in early stages, there should be compression. When a person is really in advanced stages, maybe 2 or 3, initially it may be difficult to get into compression until you have decongested the tissue.
They feel betrayed by their bodies. I'm doing all the right things. Why isn't this doing all the right things? And so now when we get into trusting the body and knowing the body has natural mechanisms, it has a natural wisdom, that you can communicate with your own body. You can actually find out what your body needs and what you can do to support it. In my experience, there's nothing that diet doesn't affect. So what, for good or for ill. So if you eat better, you will have positive results. If you eat worse, you'll eventually have negative results. It's cause and effect. It's science. There's no way out of that conundrum. What I often recommend is that people do like just a whole plant-based food diet, even if it's just for 7 days. When you supernourish your body with a diet of just plant-based foods for a few days, it gives your body a chance to clean out. Suddenly it's getting all this nutrition and nutrients in a whole plant-based form.
So we want to eat a diet that's rather going to quench inflammation as opposed to causing inflammation. And those are your essential fatty acids. Nuts and seeds and chia seeds and omega-3 fatty acids, fish oil. So you should actually avoid all gluten products and any flour products, so that's sugar, cookies, pasta, processed foods, packaged foods. Because I'm a lipedema patient and I know what I have done to maintain, I encourage all of my patients, you really need to be very strict about things. You can still enjoy your food. I love cooking. I enjoy my food, but I have healthy choices. My goal as a therapist is to help my patients make sure that we either get the situation much better or we make sure that it does not progress. There is always hope, there are always things to do, and often patients give up and they continue eating all the wrong foods, and when you eat all the refined carbohydrates, it's like putting fuel onto a fire. So there is hope, you can have treatment, there's manual lymph drainage, there's compression, there's diet, there's exercise. It is a multifaceted approach.
Unlike the circulatory system, which has the heart to pump blood throughout our bodies, the lymphatic system has to move lymph fluid using its own muscles that surround its vessels. It's similar to the way the intestines move food through our digestive tract by squeezing it along. Small valves inside the vessels help direct the fluid in one direction. But when our lymphatic system is overloaded, the vessels become enlarged and the valves blow out. The fluid, cells, and protein back up into our tissue, causing swelling and inflammation. Over time, inflammation causes a hardening of the tissue called fibrosis, as well as the production of more fat cells. Because the stagnant fluid is no longer filtered by the lymph nodes, the tissue can develop infections. Exercise really helps move lymphatic fluid. When your muscles contract, they essentially squeeze the lymphatic vessels and push the fluid through your system. Activities such as swimming, bouncing on a trampoline, walking, yoga, and stretching can really help the lymphatic system drain fluid and reduce swelling. While this may not cure lipedema, it can help prevent the progression to lipolymphedema.
I opened up RipFit because that's what I was passionate about. I was learning how to manage myself and my condition, and I wanted more knowledge. I love to learn, so I had gotten a scholarship to do that. I was very squishy and just felt very fluid-filled, and I did have swelling in my lower legs especially. That's where I see the swelling a lot. I mean, I can't run because of the lipedema. It hurts too much. And they know that I have a medical condition that causes me pain and that I can't do that. But they also see that I do other things to keep active. Like, you don't have to run to be fit. And the more people I tell, the more fascinated they are and the more supportive they are. I finally figured out a good plan for me. I tweaked my eating a little bit. I was more consistent with dairy and gluten-free. From there, the 60 pounds came off. So that was a life changer for me, just getting the regular body fat off. And my legs didn't change. I still had the swelling, still had the pain. And I took 800 milligram Motrin twice a day. And that never took the pain away. It dulled it enough where I could kind of cope throughout the day. Exercise for me is a stress reliever, especially having to teach because I have to show up. I have no excuse. But that consistency is definitely key. So I just did the best that I could. I tried to exercise more, eat a little healthier.
And I love them to go to yoga if they can, and there's chair yoga for people who can't get down on the floor and do things, and do activities that make you feel good.
Everybody needs to move the liquid because the liquid moves with motion of the muscles and breathing. These are the two major pumps for the lymphatic fluid. And the yoga poses that I use are following the sequence of the lymphatic system. But the results are really superlative, I would say.
The only interventions we really have for pure lipedema is intensive exercise, aggressive weight loss, and even then that type of fatty tissue is more resistant to typical weight loss techniques. Although I will say this, people will say, oh, it doesn't change at all, but it does. If you measure it, it changes. It doesn't, the basic disproportion between the upper body and the lower body persists. But if you actually measure the circumference when people engage in intensive exercise and aggressive weight loss, it does get smaller. Many people, especially if they are overweight or obese, have arthritis. So they really, as time goes on, have difficulty with high impact exercise. But swimming is a great exercise for people. It sort of eliminates gravity to some degree. It takes the stress off the joints. The water has a massaging effect. Walking through the water is good for strength and conditioning and sort of cardiovascular fitness.
I think it's a multi-pronged approach. It's not, here's your pill, here's your wrap. You know, it's here's your compression, your wrapping, your exercise, your diet, your supplements, and can we actually cause the fat to recognize that it's not needed anymore.
There's more than one way to treat patients and get a good result. What we're trying to understand is there perhaps one way that's a little better or offers a certain advantage in a particular patient who has certain risks that another one might not. In certain areas, perhaps one technique will work better. It's perhaps more important to understand what you're doing and have a thoughtful approach that contains and minimizes the risks.
There are various techniques, surgical techniques, and one of the ones that really has an application to both lymphedema and lipedema is what they call suction-assisted lipectomy, or what we think of colloquially as liposuction.
What we're doing with lipo is we are correcting disproportion. So whenever I look at a person's body, I'm looking from their ankle up to their neck and determining where they in or out of balance proportion, because you really want to take care of those disproportionate areas, whether it's 1 surgery, 2 surgeries, or 3 surgeries.
Liposuction is the basic treatment for lipedema patients because we get them pain-free. Not beautiful, not this, all this, but they are pain-free and their quality of life is coming back to almost normal.
I had moved out to Los Angeles and I was pursuing acting. And when I got out there, people kept saying, "You're too big, you're too big. You're so fantastic and talented, but you're too big." And I was going to the gym all the time. I was like, well, I can't get smaller. All of a sudden, somebody said, "You're so photogenic, like you should pursue modeling." And I was like, "I'm too big." And they said, "No, plus size modeling." I was like, what? It's wild because what actually made me be a plus size model is having lipedema. Because of lipedema, I have this insane figure. And there's a 20-inch difference between my waist and my hips because of lipedema. I wear a 12 top and an 18 bottom. And I just kept getting those phone calls like, "You need to be smaller, you need to be smaller." And over time, it got into phone calls saying, "You're huge, you're huge." And man, your whole, like, your self-confidence just drops. Because no matter what you do, it's like you're not good enough. All I heard was all the things that were wrong with me. Because my legs just started getting really, really lumpy. You can't be toned when you have lipedema. Maybe when in the early stages, but I'm already stage 2. I'm 29 years old. Most of the people who find out they have lipedema are 50, 60. So for them to be doing the surgery on me with where my body is, because my skin may be able to retract or at least tighten up pretty well after, but I don't know, like I don't expect to be skinny after this. I don't expect to have the perfect body or to be toned. I do expect to have my legs not feel as heavy.
The whole procedure is not for cosmetic reasons. We aim for to make your shin bone visible again. So you will find the shin bone. So we take off this part and we take away this part so that you can walk, and we reduce the amount of fat that you can close your legs again.
You will be a little swollen right after, so it takes time for that to go down because the surgery itself causes some swelling. You'd be patient to allow the healing process to play itself out because it takes a month.
In your age, 1 year it takes to reach the final result.
Anything in medicine has its risks, and so we just need to be forthright and guide patients relative to how much risk that is and do everything in our power to minimize it.
You know, it's about really doing your research and trying to find yourself the right specialist. And that's another thing I got to say, and I think lipedema patients are great with this. They want to understand and learn and make the right decision, and I just think that is so important.
If the liposuction is done properly, they are free of pain. In reality, it comes close to 100%. They get a relief from 10 down to 1 or 2, and most of them are down to 0.
I did liposuction of the inner thigh 1 week ago. Now is the typical signs after 1 week with some hematomas and a little bit post-operative edema. That is normal. That will be treated by compression and manual lymphatic drainage. She gets the typical post-operative treatment, which is routine in our clinic, and well, it's a normal recovering time and situation.
The pre-care and aftercare was very thoughtful, and I think that is perhaps the most important element in ensuring that patients don't have problems. You know, the use of compression and anticoagulant therapy and early ambulation and these sort of things that are really outside of the surgical procedure itself are probably as important, if not more so, in having a good outcome.
Surgery can be an excellent option for most lipedema patients, but it isn't for everyone. Chicky, for example, has venous insufficiency, which can accompany lipedema.
People don't know what it's like, they take it for granted, having normal eggs.
It's not uncommon to see venous insufficiency in patients
Right.
who have swelling and then, trying to discern it. And
Right.
one of the things that we talked about was the fact that usually if there's a venous component, you want to try and deal with that prior to doing liposuction. Because I think you need to go see someone who does a lot of venous surgery and who's not just doing cosmetic veins, but is a vascular, does vascular surgery.
Undoubtedly, your venous disease has been present for a long time, which is why you've noticed varicose veins for a long time. So probably dating back to your pregnancies.
I mean, I'm grateful. I could have something so much worse. I have legs that I can still walk in. I can still walk. It's painful, but I walk through it. I walk. I'll just keep walking. So I have a lot to be grateful for. I'm not saying, but it has been something that I've lived with my whole life.
So what ended up happening is my condition worsened. I was losing my mobility. I needed to have the surgery. And so I asked one of the doctors that I had filmed if he would do the surgery. And then what ended up happening is that I invited Doctors Smith and Diane and Dr. Herbst as well to come to Germany. And so we all went to Germany in March of 2014. So we had a gathering in Frankfurt with 40 of the top people who knew anything about lipedema, and the docs from the US, but from Germany and Poland and the Netherlands and England, and they came from all over, and we had a day-long session that was really phenomenal. And I think it was the start of something that we're now going to bring to a whole new level with the symposium in New York. Since 1940, when doctors Allen and Hines first identified the condition, almost nothing has been done to find a cure for lipedema.
Why lipedema in some patients developed? That's the question. When lipedema is a sign for a disease. And I would like to know the disease that caused lipedema. That's the question. Very simple.
There's a problem that's called lipedema, and we need to do better. We need to understand why the fat grows. Are these fat cells identical to the usual fat in the body? They seem to be resistant to certain processes. We mentioned diet and exercise don't affect them. Why?
Once someone develops a condition like this, it's like you, how do they know where to go? If their doctor doesn't even know?
What I want to emphasize is we need research. We need research, more research in terms of lymphology, but mainly in lipedema.
It might be actually, and we hope of course, and it looks like this, that at least in a subset of the patients there will be actually one gene which is tightly associated. And if this is the case, then of course we can take the gene and then we can start doing research.
What we'd have to do then is understand a bit more about what that gene did. Because the thing about lipedema, we still don't know if it's primarily a fat disorder or primarily a lymph problem.
Not until we get a better handle on how, first of all, lipid derangement, and secondly, lymphatic function, then I think we'll probably be in better position to tackle this very, very difficult problem.
I mean, it's not completely clear that the fat around lymphatics is driven by lymph leakage, but I think it's a very reasonable hypothesis to continue to try to test. And it fits with the concept, which there is a little experimental support for, that when lymphatics are less functional than normal, there's even more leakage, and that could contribute to greater growth. One of the things that we will attempt to answer over time in my laboratory is there a purpose to the fat around lymph nodes?
We must study, for example, the hormonal receptors of membrane of cells. above all respect to the feminine hormones, estrogens above all.
I've seen that in lipedema, for instance, there's bruising. That would suggest that the blood vessels are actually fragilized, and that could be an indicator of the endothelial dysfunction. And I've also seen that there's vasodilation generally in these beds, so there's something going on probably with vascular function.
What we really need to bring together for this field is inflammation, lipid metabolism, and vascular biology, those three fields somehow together. But I think that that could be a really interesting mix.
But in case of lipedema, it seems to be a very slowly progressing disease. So it might be that there's more chance to intervene and just to stop it if we would know what it is.
It's about the whole kind of team approach from specialists and experts, you know.
So it's really built a community which fosters collaboration, fosters the interchange of ideas that ultimately will accelerate the process, and that already has. I mean, look how much has happened in the last year. Having this sort of casual interaction that's turned into a relationship amongst the lipedema community is going to be very helpful, because I think it is important to get us all from the different perspectives focused on the problem and sort of getting insights from each other, because each, you know, we're each coming at it from a slightly different viewpoint.
I think every academic center, at least, should be devoting its energies to this particular area, should teach it in the medical schools with the lectures, and inspire students to want to do it. And that's how it will advance. And I think that's what's happening. It's certainly beginning to happen everywhere. We are seeing more advances in the last 10 years than we saw in the previous three or four decades.
So we have so many factors which can influence this condition. So it will take time to solve or disclose all these secrets about lipedema.
There are a lot of things that people don't die from. It doesn't mean that they aren't very dramatic in impacting someone's life. And you need to be verbal and really very strong that things have to change.
We need people to stand up for themselves and recognize all of the influences and challenges. And until there's really a uniting voice saying, no, this isn't acceptable to be treated this way, it's hard really to move the needle globally.
I think that, again, this is a complicated process where women need to not only challenge their own self-doubt and self-blame, but they need to be able to start to challenge it with other people. And that means enlisting support partners, enlisting friends, having support groups where you feel safe to talk about these issues. I mean, the bottom line is that we need to demand respect for women regardless of their body size. And that is a right.
We need to help create that critical mass of people who stand up and say, basically, I'm mad as hell, I'm not going to take it anymore, this is important, make it your priority.
I want my lipedema sisters that are stage 1 to never get to this point. Because at one point in my life I had to have been in stage 1. And I don't want that to happen to anybody. I'm going to get choked up because I don't want that to happen to anybody else. I stood there for years and watched this change and watched these things happen to my body, knowing it wasn't right, and nobody knew what to do. And I didn't know what to do. And if I had known then what I know now, I can tell you I'd be tooting everybody's horn saying, you need to talk to me now, and I need you to listen, because this shouldn't happen to anybody.
One of the things that was amazing about this whole process is the people. Oh my God, it's like all over the world. Women who have lipedema all over the world reaching out. And this sense of really us helping one another. I would not be where I am were it not for, I can think of a dozen women who were critical in my whole process of learning and understanding from different parts of the world. And the physicians and the surgeons, unbelievably kind and generous and willing to take hours with this patient from the US, and they were so open to it and supportive. This would not be were it not for so many of these professionals and lovely, lovely people, all looking for answers and willing to collaborate and willing to make it into something that was much bigger than any one person could hold.
There's so many things to say to the younger women, the little girls are like 13, 15, 18-year-olds who are struggling with weight issues, and many of them who don't know that they have this. But for the most part, for them, I just want them to know you're going to be okay.
If people stay positive, remain hopeful, and get on the journey, do whatever they have to do, get educated, and take a step, and don't be afraid. And always remember that you're never too old.
I have actually felt better since I had a name to put on it. At some point, I think I've forgiven myself just a little bit for everything I never did wrong in the first place.
I like that.
Thank you for giving me a name for it.
If you want to learn more about lipedema, please visit our website, www.lipedemaproject.org, where you'll find information, podcasts, courses, and this documentary. And you'll find out more about this disease they call fat lipedema. And if you're wondering, please know it's not your fault.